Welcome everyone to Buddhist Center.
I didn't hear recording
I saw a recording come up, so I think it is recording. I
Okay.
saw something, but maybe it said
Terry
recording's
said
full.
yes. Okay.
It did go recording in progress. See, we must have a problem with our audio. Sorry, everybody. Welcome to Buddhist Center. My name is Jeff Allen. Tonight we're looking at Lama Tsongkhapa's Source of All My Good, or Foundation of All Good Qualities, or a begging for a mountain of blessings, as it can also be called. So we're so fortunate to once again hear these holy words from Lama Tsongkhapa. It's supported by Pabunka Rinpoche's commentary, and of course the oral commentary that Khenser Geshe Wandak gave us on this text and what this text is talking about, and the bigger text, the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment that he spent so much time on, and before that, the root text of all of it, Atisha's Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment. So we're going to unpack this text the way that Khenser Geshe Wandak would want us to, and that's by really getting to know each of these stanzas in a way that we know what they implicitly are talking about, and that we know that those little tiny stanzas are holding chapters and chapters of information if we try to expand upon what that kind of summarized meaning is. So cool that over all of these years we've learned how to unpack stanzas and we've learned how to see the intentions of Buddha and the sutras, and we've grown to be able to understand because of the ornaments of the stages of the path to enlightenment that are beautifully strewn all over the sutras and the authentic Indian commentaries, that we have a chance at knowing the entire path and being able to become Buddhas in this very lifetime, because our teachers have not left anything out. We are so fortunate to have within our childlike hands all of these texts and all of these videos and all of these teachers that are present in the world that can help us to elucidate our path that will eventually end up as Buddhas. We will all be Buddhas. And we will no longer have fear because we won't have afflictive obstructions. And we will no longer have any kind of lack of happiness or unfulfilled happiness because the obstructions to omniscience will be all gone. And we'll be abiding in bliss, and we'll be a reliable guide, and we'll have perfect wisdom, compassion, power, and skillful means. It's so amazing that we all will become that holy being that we call an awakened one, someone who's woken up. We will all wake up, and we will wake up to know that cherishing others' needs is the way to bliss, and that things lack objective existence. And we have to figure out what that means and then combine these two kind of ideas of love and compassion, putting others' needs before our own, with the understanding of the lack of objective existence of reality, of phenomena. So before we get started with anything about the root text, let's do some practice together. And we recognize, let's practice the instructions that we've learned. We see that Lord Atisha shows us one of the greatness of the teachings of the Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment is that Lord Atisha shows us that all teachings are instructions for practice. So when we do this introductory setting of motivation and glancing meditation and so forth, we're actually practicing the instructions. And we're kind of tasting a little bit, with different opportunities to look at different texts and different methods of practice, what we will need to really do if we want to saturate our mind with the teachings enough that we can develop first that discarding of the attachments for this life, and then eventually discarding attachments for samsara, and then eventually discarding attachment for an abiding nirvana, and knowing you must become a Buddha, and that's what we will eventually arrive at that highest state. So before we get started, let me just get to a place in the book I wanted to be at so that when it's all very cohesive. I meant to be here already, but progress. Okay. So let's get into a meditation posture that we've gotten into many times before, that will be a physical posture that will help support our mental progress. We'll get into the 7-point Vairocana posture, Anyone who is new to that posture, I've explained it many times. I actually just explained it in a post on TikTok a couple posts ago, so you can get a real understanding of what the 7-point Vairocana posture is. But the main part that's so important is to have your spine straight. Back, very straight. Spine like a stack of coins. So we get into the 7-point Vairocana posture, and we're going to try to get our minds calmed down, more realistic, not so attached and busy, not so angry and busy, just to a place where we're more realistic, from which we can build virtue, we can accumulate merit, purify misdeeds, and have the wisdom arisen from hearing, analysis, and meditation. So let's get started. Let's start by breathing in and out. So we're going to be breathing in and out through our nose. The 7-point Vairocana posture has our mouth in a comfortable position with our tongue on the roof of our mouth, kind of against our teeth. So that allows for the mouth to have saliva to flow, and the breathing in and out through the nose makes it so our mouth doesn't dry out. And that's going to matter when your mind can sit for hours and hours and hours. If your body can't do it, or your body has some sort of obstacles that come up, you're trying to meditate with your mind and suddenly your mouth is dry. Each of these aspects or points that we get into physically have a reason, and they are the reason always for allowing our minds to not be distracted by our body's posture. Our mind is what's meditating. Our mind is what will become Buddhas so we have to really, really get good at supporting and using any tool we need in order to get our mind into that focused state that's so, so clear. So we're going to begin breathing in and out through our nose, breathing in, bringing the breath all the way to the top of the breath, filling our lungs and our diaphragm, and then very gently turning the breath around and exhaling and counting 1. We're going to do the same thing, breathing in, filling the lungs and diaphragm, gently turning around the breath and counting 2. So this is going to be one focal object, one aspect of focal objects. So now we're establishing the focal object of our kind of single-pointed, calming, fixed meditation. The focal object so far is breathing in and out and counting on the exhale. Now we're going to add to this kind of practice the front generation of image of Buddha Shakyamuni. About 2 feet away from us. Buddha Shakyamuni is the image right behind my head. So imagine, though, in front of you, 2 feet away, about the size of your thumb, about 2 inches or so, about eye height. So 2 feet away, 2 inches or so tall, eye height. A beautiful, radiant, glowing image of Buddha Shakyamuni in a static form, though. Very important that this particular fixed meditation, when we're doing visualization, this is a static, fixed form of Buddha Shakyamuni. He's not moving around. Geshe Aga gave me this instruction recently that although we always see pictures of Buddhas alive, we want to always imagine as a living being. That living being shouldn't be moving around and doing things if we're trying to have fixed meditation. It has to be a very static object. But the image should be 3-dimensional and so forth, but a very static object. So we're breathing in and out. On the exhale, we're counting. We have the very fixed image of Buddha Shakyamuni 2 feet in front of us, 2 inches tall, glowing, beautiful, and radiant at eye height. And we're doing this meditation all with our mind. Our focal object is breathing in and out, counting Buddha Shakyamuni, and we're trying to guard against distractions. We're trying to keep our mind from the distraction of scatteredness, or going somewhere other than the breathing in and out, counting in Buddha Shakyamuni, thinking about other things. And we're trying to keep it from getting sleepy and dull, unclear. So we have a little spy in our mind that's called introspection, that's watching to make sure that the mindfulness, which is the focal object, mindfulness is not forgetting your focal object, not forgetting it, your focal object breathing in and out in the counting in Buddha Shakyamuni. So your introspection is making sure that that's occurring, that you're not excited, you're not distracted by scatteredness, excitement, or lots of different conceptualities, and you're not distracted by dullness and sleepiness, because this is a form of distraction, and this is the hardest form of distraction to get rid of, and many yogis mistake that calm, lazy form of meditation for realization and sit there for years. Don't be like that. Use introspection to make sure your meditation is clear and not excited, and it's focused on exactly what you're telling your mind to focus on. So not to belabor this issue each class, but you're telling your mind what to do and rein it in. Fight with your mind. I know some meditations, you're trying to just watch your mind do its thing. This is not what we're doing. We're telling it, breathing in and out, counting's on the back breath, and Buddha Shakyamuni only. And it doesn't have to be that we get the Buddha Shakyamuni to the perfect, most beautiful, detailed, painted image. It could just be like the shape. But we're going to do the best we can, and we're not going to allow our mind to stray from those objects. And we're going to bring it back with mindfulness, because we told us we're not forgetting what? Breathing in and out, counting, and the object of observation of Buddha Shakyamuni. Okay, so we're going to rein it back in with mindfulness if we notice our mind doing what we told it not to do, which was scatter or get dull. Okay, so let's start. Enthused by great compassion, you taught the immaculate Dharma to dispel all perverted views. To you, the Buddha, Gautama, I pay homage. We're so fortunate to be able to think about such a holy being, this holy being that we will become just like. We will get rid of the afflictive obstructions of our mind. We will get rid of the obstructions to omniscience within our mind. And we will become perfectly enlightened Buddhas. We have Buddha nature. Our mind can mature to the state of purity. The defilements within our mind are not our mind. The defilements within our mind are adventitious stains that can be removed. Our mind is empty of inherent existence. It doesn't have any nature of this or that. Therefore, the defilements are not its nature. Its nature is empty and pure. The Buddha's mind's nature is empty and pure. The Buddha's mind is empty of objective existence, and our mind is empty of objective existence. We have the same nature of mind. We have the same potential that Buddha Shakyamuni had before he became Buddha Shakyamuni, that Tara had before she became Tara. We have the same potential within our minds. We just haven't found that treasure, and we haven't engaged in the things that we need to proliferate our minds into the state of purity. But we will. We're so, so fortunate that we can engage in the stages of the path which will allow us to be free from the lower realms of cyclic existence. Those teachings shared in common with beings of small capacity that show us how to loosen our grip on this life. We can engage in practices which will allow us to be free from all the various forms of suffering of cyclic existence. Because we have this human basis and we have this mind that's empty of inherent existence and can mature, we can mature it with the stages of the path to enlightenment, and the teaching shared in common with beings of medium capacity will allow us to be free from cyclic existence altogether. How fortunate we are to have this human basis of 8 lasers that will allow us to achieve an abiding nirvana where we no longer have fear, we no longer have afflictive obstructions by relying on the 3 highest higher trainings. By understanding the 4 Noble Truths very, very thoroughly and abandoning the origin of suffering, we too can get rid of those afflictive obstructions and achieve an abiding nirvana like a hearer, solitary, realizer, arat. We're so fortunate we have this mind that can mature. We can become Buddhas by relying on the stages of the path for beings of great capacity. we can get rid of not only the afflictive obstructions, but the obstructions to omniscience. We're so, so fortunate. We can become Buddhas by relying upon the 5 grounds and 10 paths taught in the teachings sharing for the teachings for beings of great capacity. So fortunate to have the perfection vehicle and the resultant vehicle, the tantric vehicle within our world. Only a few Buddhas and all the 1,000 Buddhas that will come during these times. Eons and eons and eons, and only a few will teach Tantra, and Buddha Shakyamuni is one of them. And Lama Tsongkhapa, the 11th Buddha, will be one. And we're connected to both of those holy beings. So, so fortunate. So now, imagine that from Buddha Shakyamuni, that beautiful static image, that static nature is ended. And there's an explosion from Buddha Shakyamuni, who's now alive and vibrant and smiling and happy, that explodes into the entire merit field. The merit field of all the holy beings, all the holy gurus, Buddhas, and bodhisattvas. Imagine that they're there right in front of you. It's no longer static, just like right there, like you can see them right in front of you. They're active, holy beings, maybe debating, having conversations, just so full of bliss. Imagining Kensar Geshe Wandak, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Geshe Lobsang Gompo, Umzala Geshe Aga, Geshe Dorji Damdu, all the holy monks and nuns, Geshe Mala Tenzin Lajrenla, Demalocha Rinpoche, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, all of these holy beings that have come into our world have blessed us so much with their teachings. Imagine them in the space in front of you, those holy beings who we've been in contact with, like Kensar Geshe Wandak and Geshe Lobsang Gompo and His Holiness the Dalai Lama. So, so fortunate. Now imagine not only all the gurus there, all the lamas there, imagine now the lamas and Buddhas of the extensive deeds lineage now are in the space in front of you. That holy lineage passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Lord Maitreya to Master Asanga and Basu Bandhu and Dignaga and Dharmakirti and Vimuktasena and Haribhadra and Shakya Prabha and Guna Prabha. Imagining, and Lama Salimpa, imagining those holy beings in the space in front of you. Those holy beings who have taught us logic and the grounds and paths, the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment. Those holy beings are in the space in front of you that you're so connected to. Now imagine the beings of the profound view lineage are in the space in front of you. That holy lineage passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Manjushri, to Nagarjuna, and Buddha Palita, and Chandrakirti, and Aryadeva, and Shantideva, and Chandrashita, and Baba Vega, imagining all those holy beings in front of you, responsible for allowing us to understand the Madhyamika Prasangika view of emptiness, those subtle, subtle views that Buddha taught at the second turning of the wheel of Dharma. We can understand because we have such a connection with Nagarjuna and Chandrakirti and Aryadeva. We have such a strong connection to this profound view lineage. We're so, so fortunate. Imagine the holy beings of the lineage of blessings, of the lineage of practice, that holy lineage that teaches us to see the emptiness of the mind, passed down from Saraha to Matripa, and holy beings like Tilopa and Naropa, and Marpa and Milarepa and Gampopa. Imagine them all in the space in front of you, like they're right there. They're very active, holy beings looking down upon you. Now imagine that also you see Lama Atisha and Master Dron Tompa and the Kadampa masters and all the holy beings of the Nyingma, Kagyu, Sakya, and Galu lineage. We see Guru Padmasambhava and Sakya Kunga Nimpo, and Sakya Pandita, and Karmapa, and Lama Tsongkhapa, and Kirtubje, and Jelsubje, all of these holy beings of the lineages, all in front of you in the space, right in front of you, all those lamas. All the deities of the highest Yoga Tantra, Performance Tantra, and Action Tantra in the space in front of you. The 35 Buddhas all in the space in front of you. The protector deities are all there. And they're so pleased that you are here. You are here doing something that will cause you to have fearlessness and infinite happiness. And that's the whole goal of all the gurus, Buddhas, and bodhisattvas, to have every single sentient being be free from suffering, the causes of suffering, and to have happiness and the causes of happiness forever. And all the Gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas see that you're here doing something about that. Now start to think about that all sentient beings are just as important as you are. Recognize their importance. Recognize that their pain hurts just like your pain hurts. Their happiness feels good just like your happiness feels good. Their happiness is just as important as yours. Their suffering and the removal of it is just as painful and wanted to be removed as yours. Cherishing yourself, having a self-centered attitude causes so many problems. Causes so many problems personally. At a world level, all the wars and so forth are caused by self-cherishing, self-centered attitude. We see the downfalls of this attitude. We see the wonderful qualities that beings who cherish others have. We think about His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who just wants to get through his security, to get to people, to hug them, to say hello, to tell them he cares so much. We see what a holy being that is, what an example that is. And that's a being that cherishes others. Oh, wow, if we could just be that great of a being, that would make us so much happier. We see when someone has a child and they see that, oh, I would do anything for this being. I love this being so much. And they feel so happy. That's a little taste of what it's like to cherish others more than yourself and get the bliss that you can experience. Imagine if you could take away suffering from those sentient beings that are so important, just like you. You don't want suffering. They're just as important as you, and now you know that cherishing them is the key to your bliss. Be so nice if you could take on their suffering. Be so nice if you could just give them happiness. Somehow, if you could give them your root virtues, if you could give them all of your happiness, that would somehow make you have more happiness. You recognize that you must put their needs before your own. And that's the way that you can really experience bliss. We have so much in common with sentient beings. The interdependence is so clear. Everything that we have is dependent upon other sentient beings. All the things that we enjoy, the things that give us comfort, our home, our shelter, our food, everything is dependent on other sentient beings. We think about just one thing we have, how many sentient beings were required to get it into our hands. And we think about everything that we have. And we'll start to find that we have connections with every single sentient being. And they went out because of love and compassion, because they cared about others, because they cared about their family, or at least cared enough about themselves, had that love where it starts for us, for themselves, that they knew they wanted to be free from suffering and have happiness. So they went out and did things that then make it so we can have happiness and we can be comfortable. How kind they have been to us. How kind in our previous lives they've been to us, and we've just forgotten. We have such a lack of clarity because our mind is so obscured. We can't see our connection to every single sentient being. We can't see that the food we ate required generations and generations sometime who are not even here with us, who are in new lives. They might be someone we consider an enemy, and they're the only reason that we're eating today. We have to see this interdependence and see the foolishness of labels, of friends that we're so attached to and only them, and enemies that we hate so much, and strangers we could care less about. We see that we have a connection to every single sentient being, and they're all so kind to us. We see this so clearly. And we say, I must do something, and I will do something. How nice it would be if all sentient beings had happiness and the causes of happiness. May they have happiness and the causes of happiness. I will take it upon myself, the task of bringing sentient beings to a place of happiness where there are only causes of happiness. May the Gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas please bless me to be able to fulfill this. And then I think how nice it would be if all sentient beings were free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. I will take it upon myself, the task of freeing them from suffering and the causes of suffering. May the Gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas please bless me to be able to do this. I will take on myself the task of freeing every single sentient being. And we recognize that we can't. We recognize that we don't have that ability. We aren't the reliable guide that the Buddha is. We go for refuge to the Buddha in order to be free from the 8 types of suffering, 6 types of suffering, and the 3 types of suffering. In order to renounce the origin of suffering, we go for refuge to the Buddha. And we know that we aren't a Buddha. We aren't a reliable guide for everyone. We can't even count all sentient beings, let alone be their reliable guide. So we must become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. So sit with that and think about this. May I become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings in dependence upon those reasons we just thought about. May I become a Buddha. So what can I do for sentient beings now? How can I help sentient beings? What do all sentient beings need? All sentient beings need what I need. The teachings, to be able to have the wisdom arisen from hearing, analytical meditation, analysis and meditation. The only way that sentient beings can have happiness, the causes of happiness, and be free from suffering and the causes of suffering is the same way that I will. So now imagine that you have infinite number of hands and you grab all sentient beings by the hand and you bring them to this teaching. Imagine you grab all the hell beings, the hot hell, cold hell, surrounding hells, all the hungry ghosts, all the animals living underground, living in the sea, living in the sky, living in trees, living on the ground. Imagine bringing all the animals here. Imagine you bring all human beings here. We've discarded labels. Everyone is a being we would equally want to benefit. We would equally want to free from suffering if we could. So we bring all humans here. All the demigods we imagine we bring here. And we imagine we bring all the beings of the gods' realms. The desire realm gods, the form realm gods, formless realm gods. Because we know they think they're in nirvana. We know so many beings think they're liberated because of their state of meditation. But they're fooled and deceived by their own mind. And we bring them all here to hear the teachings. Now imagine that the merit field is just erupting with bliss from the fact that all sentient beings have been brought here by you. You've led them all here. And now imagine that you and all sentient beings just go for refuge to this reliable guide and then also wish to become Buddhas for the sake of everyone, for the sake of each other, leaving out none. And now we'll offer a 7-limb prayer just in practice. So imagine that you and all sentient beings are making prostrations, physical, mental, and verbal prostrations to the entire merit field, to all the Gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas. Imagine that you're making physical prostrations. Now imagine that you're making offerings, beautiful, beautiful offerings with your mind to the merit field. Imagine that you're offering things owned and unowned, things that you have. Imagine that you offer bathing water and drinking water, and flowers and incense and candles and scented water and food and music, offering your practice to all the merit field, the Gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas. Imagining just beautiful, beautiful offerings that you're making. Now imagine that you acknowledge your downfalls. You acknowledge those things that you've done wrong to all the Gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas so that they can help you, they can teach you how to transform your mind to abandon non-virtue. Not to be judges, not to be in some way scolding us, but helping us and loving us. So imagine that you're confessing every negativity that you've engaged in this hour, last hour, all day, etc., and those things that you can't remember. Imagine that you're acknowledging these downfalls. You're doing it to the Gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas. you're going for refuge, and you want to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. So when we acknowledge our downfalls, when we do this practice, we apply what's called the four opponent powers. So we're going to just, first of all, it would be the power of basis. So we've acknowledged our downfalls, and most of the time when we do non-virtue, we do it in relation to the three jewels or other sentient beings. So this is why we first have the power of basis, where we go for refuge and we generate bodhicitta. Bodhicitta is the mind that wants to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. So we say, I go for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by practicing giving and the other perfections, may I become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. So we first establish these witnesses, in a sense. They're already here in this sense because we have the merit field, but we're establishing this more of a solid, even witness to our acknowledgement, so that we can say, please help me change, become better. This is the point of this, because the Gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas, the Buddhas are omniscient and can emanate teachers and can teach us how to transform our mind. So we first establish this power of basis. Then we have the power of regret. We think about the things we've done and we regret them. We feel we shouldn't have done them. Regret is not guilt. It's just regretting it for this practice, because you know non-virtue leads to suffering. Virtue leads to happiness. You want happiness and don't want suffering. You've just done something that's going to cause you to suffer. No one else in the long run to suffer, just you to suffer. And you want help to not suffer. So you've asked the Gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas to witness this, to come, and then later help you learn how to change your mind so you don't create this kind of non-virtue again that will cause you to suffer. So it's so important that you understand these practices when you're doing them, so you establish this regret. Then, the power of an antidote is number 3. So when we look at the power of antidote, we can divide that into various categories. And we look at the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment by Lama Tsongkhapa. Power of antidote, if we remember, is divided into 6 categories. Rinpoche taught this many times. Reliance upon sutras, reliance upon emptiness, reliance upon recitation, I think it's called, but it's practicing mantras and doing deity yoga practice and so forth. Reliance upon names, reliance upon constructing images and so forth of the Buddha, and reliance upon making offerings to the Gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas as an actual opponent to the non-virtue that you've created. So this is an antidote that's being specifically applied to the non-virtue you're talking about in these 4 opponent powers. The ones you remember, the ones you don't remember, you're applying an antidote at this point to counteract it, because we know when we study karma that karma doesn't go away unless there's an opposing force. It will give rise to a result. Non-virtue will give rise to a result of suffering if it hasn't been counteracted. So this part of antidote is to counteract what you've engaged in. So the quicker when you do a non-virtue that you can apply these 4 opponent powers, the quicker you can just get rid of it. So this is a very useful tool. So those are some options. So we saw that 2 of the options of the 6 were, one was reliance upon names, and one was reliance upon profound sutras. And Rinpoche was always very clever and said that, if we recite the 35 Buddhas of confession, then the 35 Buddhas confession is part of the Sutra of the 3 Heaps. So it's a sutra. And then it also has all of the names of the Buddhas, so it's reliance upon names as well. So we've had some fun times debating back and forth which one it is and so forth. But needless to say, it's very powerful nonetheless. And we see in the commentaries, Lama Zopa Rinpoche has a very beautiful commentary that he just takes from the sutra. One of his texts he takes right from the sutra, and Rinpoche taught it right from the sutra before too, where we can see where if we recite these 35 Buddhas' names, we get rid of eons and eons of negativity for each kind of line of recitation, depending on which line of recitation it is. So I am going to recite just the names of the 35 Buddhas now, just to give you a taste of what you would do during the 4 opponent powers when you're doing the confession limb of your practice when you're sitting at home. it starts with, but I'm only going to, a couple things. Namo Shanchu Senbi Tonwa Shaba, and that's homage to the confession of Bodhisattva downfalls. Then it says, Da Mingde Shiejewa. I say, my Ming is name. So you're going to hear me say my name, and it's just because you would say your name. I, Jeff, throughout all times, take refuge in the Guru. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. And then it starts to make prostrations and homage to each of the 35 Buddhas. Normally, you would do each of these multiple times or do it multiple times depending on how, what you're trying to accomplish with it. But we're just going to read it through. I'll do the refuge part 3 times just for courtesy. And then I'll do the rest of the 35 Buddhas, and I'll recite it in Tibetan because I find more myself the connection to the Tibetan, because I've seen it translated so many different ways. I can never figure out what Buddha anyone's talking about when I hear them reciting it, unless I hear the Tibetan name, because that's always the same. So let's start here. We're in the confession limb. So don't let me forget that. Start waving your hands if I move out of the 7-limb prayer after this. I probably won't. Okay. Namo Shanju Zambi Donwa Java Da Jev Di Shijiwa Duta Dulama La Jazu Jio Zanje La Jazu Jio Ju La Jazu Jio Genyon La Jazu Jio Sanje La Jazu Jio I'm sorry. Duta Dulama La Jazu Jio Zanje La Jazu Jio Ju La Jazu Jio Genyon La Jazu Jio Duta Dulama La Jazu Jio Zanje La Jazu Jio Ju La Jazu Jio Genyon La Jazu Jio Donbo Donjen De Dejen Jeba Dajon Vayanda Ba Zobi Zanje Zobi Zanje Jawa Shacha Duba Laja Zela Dejan Jeba Doje Nimbo Rabdu Jomba Laja Zela Dejan Jeba Rinjin Nudu Laja Zela Dejan Jeba Luangi Jabo Laja Zela Dejan Shepa Pao de la Shazela, Dejan Shepa Beje la Shazela, Dejan Shepa Rinchin Me la Shazela, Dejan Shepa Rinchin da la Shazela, Rinchin Shepa, Dejan Shepa Donwa Yu la Shazela, Dejan Shepa Rinchin da la Shazela. And Dejan Shepa Drima Meba la Shazela, Dejan Shepa Belchin la Shazela, Dejan Shepa Zawa. Zampa la Shazela, Dejan Sheba, Zampejin la Shazela, Dejan Sheba, Jula la Shazela, Dejan Sheba, Jule la Shazela, Dejan Sheba, Belzan la Shazela, Dejan Sheba, Zenden la Shazela, Dejan Sheba, Zijita la Shazela, Dejan Sheba, Ube la Shazela, Dejan Sheba, Nyanyen me pepe la Shazela, Dejan Sheba, Zemejiba la Shazela, Dejan Sheba, Meto la Shazela, Dejan Sheba, Zampe Uze Namba Rube, Ngompa Jempa la Shazela, Dejan Sheba, Beme Uze Namba Rube, Ngompa Jempa la Shazela, Dejan Sheba, Noba la Shazela, Dejan Sheba, Jempe la Shazela, Dejan Sheba, Zembe Shintu, Yonda la Shazela, Dejan Sheba, Wambu Togi, Jasen Jijabo la Shazela, Dejan Sheba, Shintu Namba Numpe, Bela Jazela, Dejan Sheba, Yule Jintu Namba Jewela Jazela, Dejan Sheba, Namba Numbe, Shepe Bela Jazela, Dejan Sheba, Gune Namba Gube Bela Jazela, Dejan Sheba, Rinchin Beme, Namba Numba La Jazela, Dejan Sheba, Dajamba, Yanda Bazobe Zanje, Rimboje Dan, Pamela Rabdu, Juba, Riwanji, Jebola Jazelo, Dejan Sheba, Dajamba, Yanda Ba, Zobe Zanje, Rimboje Dan, Pamela Rabdu, Jube, Riwanji, Jebola Jazela, Dejan Sheba, Dajamba, Yanda Ba, Zobe Zanje, Rimboje Dan, Pamela Rabdu, Zubi, Juba, Riwangi, Jebola Jazelo. Okay, so this is one example of power of antidote, reliance upon names or reliance upon sutras, among the 6 possibilities in the Great Treatise on the Stage of the Path to Enlightenment. And now the final thing is your commitment. You make a commitment to, that's realistic, not engage in whatever it is you're confessing for the amount of time you can actually not engage in it. And hopefully as you become a better practitioner, that length of time will become longer and longer and will become to the point where you won't have to confess these things ever again, because you will never engage in those negativities. You will abandon all non-virtue, only engage in perfect virtue, and you will subdue your mind. So that is the teaching of the Buddha we find in the Vinaya. So we make a commitment. You only know your own mind. You know what you can and can't do. You know what's realistic. Make a commitment you can keep, because it's like a vow. You're saying in front of all the gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas, I'm going to not do this for this period of time. So it's reinforcing it in your mind that you care so much about, you go for refuge to these beings, and now you're making a commitment in your mind. So it's just making it stronger in your own mind. There's nothing that has control over you outside. Your mind is the only thing in control. There's no external creator, no external puppeteer. These people aren't all out to get you. It's your mind that's out to get you. So this is what we need to work on. So now we've completed, imagine that you and all sentient beings completed that limb of confession. And by using those 4 opponent powers, you really, really did it. Now the next limb is rejoicing. Imagine that you and all sentient beings are rejoicing in all the good that each one of you have done, you yourself have done. Rejoice in the good that you've done. Rejoice in the fact that you're here listening to this teaching right now. Rejoice in the fact that if you're meditating, you're sitting and meditating. Rejoice in everything good that you've done. Rejoice in the good that every holy being has done. So you can start to think, I rejoice in all of the holy things that Asanga has done. I rejoice in what Dharmakirti's done, and Vasubandhu's done, and Nagarjuna's done. So when you're rejoicing in what you've done, you're stamping in your mind you want to be that good. You want to do good that many. You want to do things that big. You aren't satisfied with little mind stuff. You want your mind, because you're rejoicing in big minds, you want your mind to be big. So you're rejoicing in what you see is what you want. Those holy states of mind that those beings have. So you rejoice. Lama Tsongkhapa says it's so wonderful that we have this limb, because it's so easy and we can accumulate vast amounts of merit and by doing this, by rejoicing. Now imagine that you're requesting the turning of the wheel of Dharma. Imagining that you're requesting all of the teachers to please teach. And you can be very creative because these beings are practicing the Mahayana, and they're bodhisattvas or Buddhas. They, can come teach us. Some of them, more readily emanating than others and so forth, and some of them are here. So you can be very creative and ask, teachers who are in this world to teach, but also teachers who you think maybe be in Pure Lands to teach, to please teach. Please teach the Dharma. So this limb of requesting, you can study more about, but this is very important. So imagine you and all sentient beings are requesting all of these holy beings to please turn the wheel of Dharma. And then next, you're asking them to please not go to nirvana. Please don't leave. Please don't leave this world. And this, you're meaning really like, please, like your holiness and Geshe Dorje, please don't leave this world. But then, our other teachers, they can emanate. They may already be in this world. So just always keep your connection to your gurus and say, please don't pass into nirvana. Please stay in this world. Please stay here. Because if you're not here, I can't get the Dharma, and I just asked you to teach the Dharma. So how are you going to do that if you're in nirvana abiding? Or if you, stay somewhere where I can't see you? So we're just always trying to connect to the teaching. So now imagine that you've done this. And now lastly, dedicate this virtue of this 7 limb that you've done for the in front of the merit field, to the merit field. The merit field was witness to you becoming a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings, to you getting rid of the afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience. And then you can make a mandala offering. You can do it in the offering section also, but we're playing around a little. I don't know if anyone's noticing with the 6 preparations. So you should really get to know these 6 preparations well, because they'll be the most powerful part of your practice once you know them really well. Now you can imagine you're making a mandala offering, and because you're going to supplicate, you're going to make supplications to all these beings for various things, so that we can really make the most, tell our minds we're aspiring to make the most out of everything that we're doing, and we're saying, if there's any blessing, if there's anything that's a extremely hidden phenomena that can be done for me, You know, any kind of blessing, you know, I would love that blessing. Please emanate and teach me so that I can, you know, realize these things I'm aspiring to. So you could make a mandala offering here. Just imagine, we're going to do one in a little bit. So you could make a mandala offering here and then start, after you make the mandala offering, leave the mandala offering open and then start making aspirations because your future lives depend on it. Start making aspirations to be able to realize the teachings shared in common with beings of small capacity, the teachings shared in common with beings of medium capacity, teachings for beings of great capacity, to be able to realize emptiness, to be able to have a shamatha. You get the point. Start, just make whatever it is you really, really need to work on the most, supplicate the most around that, but then make general supplications that you know, will be for the long run in everything. You know, but here we could make supplications. You know, you and all sentient beings are supplicating. You know, may we understand this Heart Sutra as we recite it. May we see emptiness from the understanding of this Heart Sutra. May we traverse the 5 grounds, the 5 paths and 10 grounds found implicitly within this Heart Sutra. So we could make all of these kind of supplications and then do whatever practice we're going to do. Lama Tsongkhapa then says, okay, now it's time to tell your mind what to do. Now you've got supplications and you've got all this practicing done. You know, normally it would start with, you know, cleaning your room, setting out images of enlightenment, 1. You know, then putting out offerings and arranging them beautifully, 2. Number 3, where we started, getting into the 7-point Vairocana posture and a seated meditation cushion, you know, and envisioning the merit field. 3, and I'm sorry, getting into the 7, clearing your mind, and then envisioning the merit field, and then making 7-limb prayer, and then making further supplications. So we make the further supplications so that we can understand these things very clearly. Now we'll recite the Heart Sutra. Imagine that you've led all sentient beings here. I'm not going to give any description of the Heart Sutra. We've given it many times before, but we know that it's explicitly talking about the lack of objective existence of phenomena, lack of inherent existence of phenomena, while still establishing existence, but showing that existence is merely subjective existence through the power of label. Very complicated topic, but you have to be able to see how things are not there, and are not really, really there. The middle between that is what the Heart Sutra teaches, as well as the 5 paths and 10 grounds. The Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge. You and all sentient beings, you've led them here. You're leading in prayer. All sentient beings hear this. The Gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas are so pleased that they're hearing the ultimate reality being sung by everyone. The Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge. Thus have I heard, once the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajagriha at Vulture Peak Mountain, together with a great gathering with the Sangha of monks and a great gathering with the Sangha of Bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One entered the samadhi that expresses the Dharma called profound illumination. At the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara, Bodhisattva Mahasattva, while practicing the profound Prajnaparamita, saw in this way. He saw the 5 skandhas to be empty of nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, how should a son or daughter of noble family train who wishes to practice the profound Prajnaparamita? Addressed in this way, noble Avalokiteshvara, Bodhisattva Mahasattva said to Venerable Shariputra, O Shariputra, a son or daughter of noble family who wishes to practice the profound Prajnaparamita should see in this way. Seeing the 5 skandhas to be empty of nature. Form is emptiness, emptiness also is form. Emptiness is no other than form, form is no other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness are emptiness. Thus, Shariputra, all dharmas are emptiness. There are no characteristics. There is no birth and no cessation. There is no impurity and no purity. There is no decrease and no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no perception, no formation, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no dharmas, no eye dhatu, no mind dhatu, no dhatu of dharmas, no mind consciousness dhatu, no ignorance, no end of ignorance, up to old age and death, no end of old age and death, no suffering, no origin of suffering, no cessation of suffering, no path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since the Bodhisattvas have no attainment, they abide by means of Prajnaparamita. Since there is no obscuration of mind, there is no fear. They transcend falsity and attain complete nirvana. All the Buddhas of the 3 times by means of Prajnaparamita fully awaken to unsurpassable, true, complete enlightenment. Therefore, the great mantra of Prajnaparamita, the mantra of great insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequaled mantra, the mantra that calms all suffering should be known as truth, since there is no deception. The Prajnaparamita mantra is said in this way. Te ata ongate gate paragate Vara samgati bodhisvadyata. Om gate gate. Vara gate. 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 Vara samgati bodhisvadyata. Thus Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train the profound Prajnaparamita. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and praised noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, saying, Good, good, O son of noble family. Thus it is, O son of noble family. Thus it is. One should practice the profound Prajnaparamita just as you have taught, and all the Tathagatas will rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, Venerable Shariputra and noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, that whole assembly in the world with its gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One. Gala jube nijo banda tamba nguje duju ngai dudo jendru baba lama yibu jinsi nizung gandro zola jazelo agazamara dejandara zamara ebe agazamara dejandara. Aga zamara dejandara zamara ya me deata on gate gate paragate parazangate buddhiza baba gonju zonji kai dembi doji she lobo doji mebo doji shiwa doji dragi baji meti beshe tanji shedding gori zo gerin donja jeje shiwa dan medun be jendan derwa dan tomba donji bonzon zonjochi tashi de janden da de jo. Now we'll make that mandala offering. Imagine that this is a request for teaching, and we're offering a perfect, beautiful universe to all the Gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas. And imagine that this perfect, beautiful universe has all sentient beings who are happy in it and practicing in it, because we can make offerings of practice and happiness and so forth. So imagine this perfect world really is perfect, and all sentient beings are so happy. Imagining that, we'll make a mandala offering. Hey, hon, can you come plug the computer in? I can't reach it. The battery, it's not plugged in. Thank you. Lori's making a battery offering so we can continue. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. Holy Lamas high, wrap the sky of your Dharma bodies in massive clouds of knowledge and love, and let them pour upon the earth of your disciples as we are ready, a shower of rain, the teachings deep and wide. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Gam Niradayami. Zanye Janan Zadye Janan La Janju Badu Danye Jazuji Dagi Chije Jibe Zananji Jala Benje Zanye Jubajo Zanye Janan Zadye Janan La Janju Badu Danye Jazuji Dagi Chije Jibe Zananji Jala Benje Zanye Jubajo Zanye Janan Zadye Janan La Janju Badu Danye Jazuji Dagi Chije Jibe Zananji Jala Benje Zanye Jubajo. Enthused by great compassion, you taught the immaculate Dharma to dispel all perverted views. To you, the Buddha Gautama, I pay homage. The one who transformed into a reliable guide, motivated by altruism to benefit sentient beings, the teacher Sugata and protector, to you I make prostrations. If you are attached to this life, you are not a spiritual practitioner. If you are attached to samsara, you have no renunciation. If you are attached to your own self-interest, there is no bodhicitta. If there is grasping, you do not have the view. May this teaching be heard and understood in the language of all sentient beings. So there's a little glance into, I was thinking this morning when I was doing what we just did, that, it'd be nice, let's just practice together. Let's see how we apply these teachings. Sometimes we'll do this, sometimes we'll do that. I apologize, my 35 Buddha mouth wasn't working so great today. It's been a long time, I see. So I had this so memorized and did this so all the time, like it was my thing. And I see how, you think you've really got something, don't do it for a little bit and see if you've really got something or not, because it's just interesting, very, very interesting. So here we are again looking at Lama Tsongkhapa's beautiful, beautiful work, the source of all my good. We're so fortunate to have texts like these. There's so many wonderful texts, that Tsongkhapa doesn't, own the category of wonderful texts, but Tsongkhapa writes some pretty darn wonderful texts, and we see all these other great masters, and we see everyone's talking about the same thing, and we see that everyone arrives at the lack of objective existence and the need for bodhicitta. Everyone arrives there, and we're so fortunate that we have these teachings that are so clear and so many commentaries that we can really unpack, like I said before, stanzas of information that I think without these beautiful commentaries and without these holy beings in the Nyingma, Sakya, and Kagyu and Galup lineages, and without the holy beings, those holy Indian pandits, we would be so, so lost. But we have all of these teachings in our world in English. So, so rare. 25 years ago, I remember when I started this journey, there was such a small kind of collection of things, and everyone was struggling to find maybe masters, or like PhD papers people had written and translated stuff so that we could get access in English to things that are just translated, like very, all over the place now. But I remember looking for like Abhisama Alamkara stuff and commentaries and having to find like, projects that people had done for their PhDs or maybe their thesis whatever it was in order to have access to, in English, this Dharma, all of these texts that we just have so many of now. I mean, I just got the Bodhisattva Bhumis by Asanga. Thank you, Art Engel, for translating it. Just so many holy translators have put in so much time and effort over the last couple of decades that we have access to Tsongkhapa's, illuminating the intent and the essence of eloquence, and the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment, and a good part of the stages of the tantric path, and all of these smaller Lamrim poems, and the medium stages of the path to enlightenment, abbreviated stages of the path to enlightenment. We are just so lucky that we have, the ocean of reasoning, the commentary on Nagarjuna's Mulya Madhyamika Karika. We have this because of a holy being named J. Garfield, who translated it, and Jeffrey Hopkins, who translated this stuff, and Thupten Jimba, who translated it, and Robert Thurman, who translated it, and Alexander Burrs, and all the holy translators. I won't be able to say everybody's name, so if I left anyone out, I so apologize. But I think you get my point. We have, because these names on the tip of your fingers, as Geshe Damdu says, these names because they've done so much work for you and for us. So we're so lucky that we have these texts. So let's look at Pabunka's commentary and Lama Tsongkhapa's root text, the source of all my good, and then let's be kind to the source of all my good. Let's give it its justice. As Rinpoche did, and let's look at the Lamrim Chema a little bit, because this is the section on the medium scope that we're in now. We're going to get to once we get to where we left off in the teaching, and I think that you really have to identify the Four Noble Truths very well, and then identify the three higher trainings very well, identify afflictions very well, and how they arise pretty well, if you want to get a kind of touch of a grasp about this medium scope that will allow you to achieve an abiding nirvana. We know that the teachings shared in commons with beings of small capacity, or the small scope, are teachings that show you how to get a good next life. So you focus on practices that will allow you to get a good next life. And what's a good next life according to us? It's a basis from which you can practice Dharma. And that practicing the Dharma is the only thing that really leads to happiness. So in this small scope, you abandon kind of your attachment to this life because you realize that your karma is giving rise to it. And most of the experiences that you're having are being affected by previous karmas. And that the actions that you're engaging in are what's going to make future karmas. And those future karmas probably won't ripen in this lifetime unless they're pretty heavy duty. So you start to understand the small scope and you abandon the grasping and the attachment to this life and start to focus on future lives. So this small scope practices of going for refuge, ethics that abandons the 10 non-virtuous activities, and acknowledging one's downfalls, that third limb in the 7-limb prayer of confession. Once you do those practices according to the Buddha, those are the practices for small scope, you won't have a rebirth in the lower realms. You won't be an animal. You won't be a slug. You won't have to be a fish or a lobster crawling on the bottom of an ocean that somebody puts in a box and then boils. You won't have to do that. You won't have to be in a hungry ghost or a hell realm, which you can decide to believe as you have more and more faith about. But you won't have to be in a lower realm if you engage in these practices of the small scope. And then the Buddha gave teachings that we're now learning about, the teachings for beings of medium capacity, where the Four Noble Truths are presented that show a being how to achieve liberation for themselves, a solitary liberation. The liberation, the arhatship, the nirvana of a hearer and solitary realizer. So in order to do that, you have to get rid of the origin of suffering. So this little part, these couple stanzas, are talking about getting rid of the origin of suffering, understanding what suffering is, knowing what cessation is, and the path that leads to it, the path of the three higher trainings. So we need to do this part justice. As the small scope, we can read about and understand it at a kind of gross level and at a subtle level. But the medium scope, to even really understand at a kind of course level, it's going to require more than just the little stanzas here. So we're not going to spend a year on this stanza, but let me get us to the stanza first. So before I get us ahead of ourselves, and let's make sure that we're always moving forward in a very, very clear way, and we're not satisfied with anything partial. We don't want anything partial going on. So we're going to make sure we do well. So Pabunga Rinpoche says this text can be divided into 4 categories. First, the very root of the path is how you take a teacher and then serve a teacher through your thoughts and actions and so forth, and how you generate more and more reverence for him or her. So this is the first category. Second category is once you have a teacher, how you train your mind. So this is the second category. So this section goes over like how you take, according to Pabunka Rinpoche's categories, it's kind of like an encouragement to take essence of this life, and then how you take the essence of this life by practicing the 3 scopes. And then these stanzas break down into different scopes. So we'll look at that. And then number 3 is a request that you can attain all favorable conditions for succeeding on the path and stop all circumstances that might prevent you from doing so. And then finally, a prayer that your future lives may be taken care of by a Lama and gain strength to reach the final end of all the various levels and paths. So these are the 4 categories. We're currently swimming around in, okay, we've gone over, now you found a Lama, and luckily we found a Lama. We had Khenser Geshe Wandak in our world for so many years, and I was so fortunate to sit next to him for 25 years and hear his holy words, and I can't get over what an incredible being he was, and how much I want to be exactly like him, and how much he taught me, and those over 1,000 teachings he gave and went into my ear, hours and hours, thousands of hours into my ears. I just will never have any way to repay his kindness except to do what I'm doing right now, because he asked me to continue the lineage and continue teaching, so I'm doing that, and to become a Buddha. That's all he's looking at. Those were the 2 kind of things. He wanted me to have fearlessness and infinite happiness, and in the meantime, could you please continue to teach what I was teaching? So I feel really, really fortunate that we found this holy being. He found us, really, or our karmas were ripened so we could, find each other. What an incredible ride our minds have been on, and how much change I've noticed my mind's been able to undergo, because I'm the only one who knows, right? My mind. I could be just making be a good actor and just be a horrendous internal human being, but I know that my mind has changed, from not so great to a little less not so great, and that's very noticeable to me. Very noticeable. And when things are noticeable, it confirms that they work. I can tell you they work, but unless you do this operation on your own mind, you can't confirm whether they work or not. The Buddha's knowledge has to become yours. You can't rely on the Buddha's, well, the Buddha said it, the Buddha said it, so it's fine. You have to hear that the Buddha said it, think about what the Buddha said, and then have the Buddha's knowledge become your knowledge. It's not the Buddha's knowledge, it's just knowledge. The Buddha doesn't have a special lock on knowledge, it's the Buddha's knowledge. It's just the nature of reality, it's just knowledge. Buddha Shakyamuni happens to be one who woke up and explained it, but truth is truth, it's just knowledge. So we're so fortunate that we can achieve these goals. So I lost my train of thought, but that's fine because I needed to get moving. So what time is it? Oh, good. I have time. Could have been like 1 in the morning, and you guys are all sitting here for all I know. Okay, the source of all my good is my kind Lama, my Lord. Bless me first to see that taking myself to him is in the proper way is the very root of the path, and grant me then to serve and follow him with all my strength and reverence. Again, anyone who's new, this is in the masculine because it's Lama Tsongkhapa. Lama Tsongkhapa's teachers were males, and he's writing to say the source of all my good is my teacher, and Lama Tsongkhapa's teachers in this case. Root teacher was Manjushri, and then had other teachers like Lama Umapa, and then of course Randawa, who was his really main teacher that he loved so much. But then in the commentary, we see him or her, because it's not gender specific, about finding a teacher, because we know that all sentient beings have Buddha nature, and all sentient beings will remove afflictive obstructions and obstructions to omniscience, and a male or female body has a mental consciousness that's empty of inherent existence, and the body doesn't become enlightened. The mind does. Yeah, so that's that. So that's okay. So now we found the Lama, and we're trying to get our strength and reverence, and we're saying, until now I thought other things were the source of all my good, and now I know that the Lama is. Please bless me to keep moving forward from here, and always knowing this fact, and not believing that a new house is the source of all my good, knowing that the teacher is the source of all my good. Why? Because the teacher teaches me how to have fearlessness and infinite happiness, how to get rid of the afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience. A new house can never provide me with that. A new house will only provide me with suffering in the future, because it is the nature of suffering, contamination, the suffering of change, contaminated happiness, the bait that makes me think samsara is great. Okay, so now after you find a Lama, the Pabunka urges us to take an essence of this life, says, gears us up to practice, says, bless me first to realize that this excellent life of leisure I found just this once is ever so hard to find and ever so valuable. Grant me then to wish and never stop to wish that I could take its essence night and day. Okay, so now you have a Lama. What should you do? You better make use of this human basis you have that's awesome. You have the ability, you have the Dharma right here where you are. You have a mind that can practice it. You have a mind that can understand it, ears that can hear it, eyes that can see it. You should really, really take advantage of it. And how would you do that? Now we get into the scopes. Okay, so then stanza number 3 says, this is the small scope. My body and the life in it are fleeting as the bubbles in the sea froth of a wave. Bless me first thus to recall the death that will destroy me soon, and help me find sure knowledge that after I have died, the things I've done, the white or black, and what those deeds will bring to me, follow always close behind, as certain as my shadow. Grant me then ever to be careful to stop the slightest wrong of the many wrongs we do, and try to carry out each and every good of the many that we may. So here we find the teachings shared in common with beings of small capacity, those teachings that show us how to get a good next rebirth. We realize death and impermanence. We realize we have this human life of leisure. We must do something with it. And we see that we have to abandon attachment for this life and go and engage in the practices which will produce fruit in our future. So we stop running after things that aren't going to make us happy, and we start actually doing things that will make us happy. So this is where what we start to do in the small scope, and we know that non-virtue causes suffering, and virtue causes happiness. So it says stop the slightest wrong of the many wrongs we do, because the slightest wrong magnifies into a big suffering. We learn that about karma, magnification of karma on Sundays. We know that the slightest wrong can turn into a very big problem for us. And then it says, try to carry out each and every good of the many that we may. Every single good that we can carry out will produce happiness. And when we have only good in our mind, we'll only have happiness. And when we have only the highest good, which is love and compassion, only in our mind, then we have the love and compassion, and we've gotten rid of the afflictive obstructions. Then those obstructions of omniscience can be removed, and we can have the mind of a Buddha. So here we're not talking about that. We're talking about a good next life at this point. But it's the same concept that gets you to Buddhahood, and that's why these are the teachings shared in common with beings of small capacity. They are common to the great scope. They are common to the medium scope. You cannot get to the medium scope without practicing the small scope teachings. You cannot realize the great scope without practicing the small and medium scope teachings. So Rinpoche reinforced this over and over and over again in our minds. Don't be satisfied with partial instructions. Partial instructions will get you to a partial enlightenment. There's no such thing. There's only an enlightenment. Partial means samsara. Maybe partial enlightenment is what some of those beings that were Buddha's last teachers thought that they had enlightenment, when they thought they had enlightenment. Yeah, we have to really practice this in a full way. So this is the teachings for beings of small capacity. Now we're in the medium scope. We arrived there last week. I know we're almost out of time. It's because I did the meditation longer, but I had intended on doing that. So I'm very happy that we did that. I think practicing together is the most important thing. And if anybody's having a hard time figuring out, like, how do I apply this? How do I sit down in the morning? What do I do? When we can do it together, it gives you kind of clues and ideas of what to take home in the morning when you wake up. Get your mind tell your mind what to do, and focus, and etc. Okay, now, bless me to perceive all that's wrong with the seemingly good things of this life. They are the bait. They cannot be trusted. They are the door to every pain I have. Grant me then to strive instead for the happiness of freedom. So what does this mean? The seemingly good things of this life. I see something I really want. I see it. It's attractive. It seems good. It's in this life. What happens to my mind? My mind comes in contact with it, discriminates it as something I really like, feels a certain way attached about it, and then I run towards it. And then there's a gap between me and getting the thing where my mind is tormented. Wanting it, I need it so badly. So I'm in so much pain in the midst of it, even though it seems like there's sometimes almost like a fake sense of a high when you're chasing after something. Your mind is disturbed. You're not at peace, if you really look at it. So then you get to the thing that you really have to have. You get it. Now you have it. Now the dissatisfaction is going to start soon because new thing becomes old thing. The new name started to die right when it was new. New started to die at new. Started becoming old at new. It looked new to you because you don't see subtle impermanence. But the thing started to die. Started to disintegrate momentarily that you're so attached to. And you see it as this static thing that will always make you happy. And then some years down the road, say it's a car. It's going to rust out and be a piece of junk and be a major source of suffering. You thought it was going to bring you all this happiness. It caused you suffering to get to it. And then when you got to it, it started to be less and less awesome as days went by. And then suddenly, that thing that was, is kind of like, it's good. You're not even admitting it yet. Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. But then your mind's starting to see things that you like better. And then you start to hate this thing. Now aversion's coming up for the same thing you were attached to. That's why this thing doesn't have aversion or attachment according to Buddha in it. Because this same thing, this same functioning phenomena of car that still probably drives down the road, performs a function of car, started as something that you became attached to. You had a gap of suffering in between. It started disintegrating. You thought its awesomeness wasn't as awesome daily, less and less and less. And then you disliked it. Now this thing makes you have aversion. Now you come in contact with it, discriminate it, and you see it's this older thing, right? And you feel bad about it. Now you hate it. And now your mind is so upset until you get rid of it, get it out of your life. And your mind thinks that the only way it's going to be happy is if you get this out of your life and get a new car that's shinier and brand new, because that actually will make you happy. And you see how, bless me to receive all that's wrong with the seemingly good things of this life. That car seemed so good. It seemed worthy of my attachment. But now it seems worthy of my aversion. It's the door to every pain I have. This attachment, this aversion, this inappropriate mental conduct is the door to every pain I have. Where does that come from? Where does all this come from? The grasping at I and phenomena as being truly established. So, what does that have to do with anything? The Four Noble Truths. We have to understand the Four Noble Truths to understand this stanza. If you understand the Four Noble Truths, you can take this stanza and you can completely understand it and explain it for the next year. If you don't understand the Four Noble Truths, you have no clue what this is talking about. No chance. If you don't understand the truth of suffering, origin, cessation, and path. No chance you can understand stanza number 5 of The Source of All My Good, that's like this big in a little book, if you don't understand the Four Noble Truths. And if you really want to understand this, you have to understand the 16 attributes of the Four Noble Truths and really the 12 links of dependent origination. Because when you get to origin of suffering, you can say it's the contaminated karma, afflictions, and their seeds, but you also really need to look at the 12 links of dependent origination and their forward and reverse order and know how many lifetimes it takes to get through those links to understand this stanza. So don't oversimplify things. So many Buddhists oversimplify things and then miss everything the Buddha was talking about. Oversimplifying emptiness is just, as Geshe Dorje Damji said, a disaster. That's my new favorite thing he says. It's a disaster because your mind will turn into a bigger mess than it started. You know, you'll think things don't exist, or you'll think things really, really exist, or maybe just the self doesn't exist, and maybe everything out there exists, and, well, maybe I don't exist, but the tree exists. Really? If you don't know how to interpret Buddha's word because you haven't studied enough, you're going to mix it up and you're going to tell others about it. And then you're going to think you're teaching them about it. And it's really going to be dangerous for you and everyone else you're talking to because you're just giving them the wrong views that are right in ignorance. Ignorance of views. There's the artificial the abandonments. There's the artificial, and then there's the kind of natural. And the artificial ones come from people telling you the wrong thing, and then you believing like, oh, there's this, or there's that self, or that kind of self. And then you believe it. And this is a view that is artificial because it's been kind of taught to you, and you believe in it. And that has to be removed. And then the natural views that kind of see everything to appear as objectively existent, but that's another story. But so we have to understand suffering, origin, cessation, and path. So where do we start? We start with the truth of suffering. I'm going to talk for 2 more minutes, and then I promise I will end. So we're first start with the truth of suffering. Buddha said this is the superior truth of suffering. Then he said suffering has to be identified. And then the third thing he said about it is there is no suffering to identify. And we can explain what that means in terms of emptiness or in terms of the first turning of the wheel of Dharma. Emptiness of the second turning of the wheel of Dharma, we can interpret it, or the first turning of the wheel of Dharma. Different interpretations of that third statement we're not going to get into. But the first, identify what suffering is. So in Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment, he identifies 8 types of suffering, 6 types of suffering, and 3 types of suffering. Identifies it as do you want to know identify what the truth of suffering that you're trying to get rid of is, you've really got to know what it is. And once you know what these 8, 6, and 3 are, it's just going to be clear you have it. The Buddha gives us this first noble truth and says, here, study this, and I think you'll be clear you have this illness. You have this condition of suffering. I don't think you'll disagree with me if you know about the 8 sufferings, 6 sufferings, and 3 sufferings. So I'm merely going to list them, and then we're going to look a little bit more at them and go into origin next week. So 8 sufferings. Suffering of birth. Does that happen? Yes. The baby, the mother is suffering. The baby is suffering. They have to hit it. It's purple sometimes. It's crying. Its skin feels like cotton, feels like sandpaper. Science says. Rinpoche used to say that. And so do the Buddhist texts, that there's so much fear and suffering that's going on. Birth, aging. Do we agree that's suffering? As we get older and older and older, maybe you won't agree if you haven't studied or aren't aging the way I'm aging. But if you're aging the way I'm aging and you can start to see how things age, you'll agree. Sickness. Sickness is not good. No one thinks sickness is good, and we all will have it. When's the next moment we're going to find out we have something horrible going on, or we get some sickness? And then death. Death will come, nothing can stop it. We don't know when, and the only thing that can help us is Dharma. Then, separating from the pleasant. We've all separated from things in our life we found pleasant, and then they're no longer there. Meeting with unpleasant things. You haven't met with anything unpleasant in your life? Not getting what you want. Do you always get what you want? Because the Buddha said that not being in control is misery. Do you always get what you want? And do you suffer from these appropriated parts you have, mental and physical? We say appropriated because you didn't pick them out at the body lot and mind lot. You weren't, right before you were born, like, I want to have, brown eyes and, a little bit of receding hairline up here. None of this you picked out. These are appropriated by your karma and afflictions. 8. 6. The uncertainty of cyclic existence. Friends become enemies. Enemies become friends. Strangers become either. And then in our lives, if we look at previous lives and future lives, we don't have any certainty in those relationships. Will the person we love so much in this life be our enemy in our next life? Were they our enemy in our last life? Was our enemy our loved one in our last life? We see this uncertainty. We see that when we die, we can't bring our friends with us. We take rebirth. And then we shuck off bodies. And then we go to high realms and go to low realms. We're never satisfied in any of it. And then we have to go alone through the process. 6. 3. Suffering of suffering, suffering of change, pervasive compounded suffering. Pervasive compounded suffering is the name of the game when we talk about the Four Noble Truths. It's what Buddha talked about, this momentary impermanence and this forced situation that we're in, where our karma, our contaminated karmas, afflictions, and their seeds throw us into another set of aggregates over and over and over again, where we have to experience the 8 sufferings, 6 sufferings, and the first 2 sufferings, the suffering of suffering and suffering of change. That's how you understand the First Noble Truth. That's how you do. You understand those very well, and you say, I don't want that. And there's more to it when we look at subtle impermanence, and we'll talk about that next time. If you're attached to this life, you're not a spiritual practitioner. If you are attached to samsara, you have no renunciation. If you are attached to your own self-interest, there is no bodhicitta. If there is grasping, you do not have the view. Enthused by great compassion, you taught the Immaculate Dharma to dispel all perverted views. To you, the Buddha, Gautama, I pay homage. We'll make a Thanksgiving mandala offering. Thanksgivings every day around Buddhism. So grateful we have these teachings in our life. So grateful we can get rid of these states of suffering and this kind of insatiability and attachment. All of these things that disturb our mind can be removed with a cure. That's the beauty, a cure. So incredible. And we know what it is. We just have to practice it. Please, please practice it. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I have collected for the benefit of the teachings of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Ozandrapa, to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri, and likewise Samantabhadra as well, with whatever dedication is praised as supreme. By all the conquerors who traverse the 3 times, I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. If I've made any mistakes in this teaching, I apologize. Om benzo sato samaya manupalaya benzo sato zeno batisha dida me baba sutogaya me baba zubogaya me baba anurag me baba zavazeni me bracha zavagama zuja me kicham shuyam kuruhum ha 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 ho bhagavan sarva tathagata benzo mame moka benzo baba maha samaya sattva Om Ve. May we always be protected by Palden Lamo. Jo Ramo Jo Ramo Jo Jo Ramo Dunjo Kala Rachamo Ramo Chadacha Tunjo Rulu Rulu Hong Jo Hong Jo Ramo Jo Ramo Jo Jo Ramo Dunjo Kala Rachamo Ramo Chadacha Tunjo Rulu Rulu Hong Jo Hong Jo Ramo Jo Ramo Jo Jo Ramo Dunjo Kala Rachamo Ramo Chadacha Tunjo Rulu Rulu Hong Jo Hong Jo Ramo Jo Ramo Jo Jo Ramo Dunjo Kala Rachamo Ramo Chadacha Tunjo Rulu Rulu Hong Jo Hong Jo Ramo Jo Ramo Jo Jo Ramo Dunjo Kala Rachamo Ramo Chadacha Tunjo Rulu Rulu Hong Jo Hong Jo Ramo Jo Ramo Jo Jo Ramo Tunjo Kala Rachamo Ramo Chadacha Tunjo Rulu Rulu Hong Jo Hong Jo Ramo Jo Ramo Jo Jo Ramo Dunjo Kala Rachamo Ramo Chadacha Tunjo Rulu Rulu Hong Jo. And may Lama Tsongkhapa's teachings remain in this world until samsara ends. Mi me ze we turjin genrezi, jime jembe wombo jambe yan, dibu mali jumzi zaweda, kanchin kibi zuchin Tsongkhapa, luzan jabi jala zoade. In that pure land surrounded by snowy mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness, all-powerful Avalokiteshvara, Tenzin Gyatso, may you stay until samsara's end. Ngangri rawe horwe jinjandir, mendan dewa malu yongwe ne, chenrezi wan denzin yazoi, Shapezi de badu den yoji. In all our lives, may we never be separated from Kensur Geshe Wandak. May we create all of the accumulations and causes necessary to meet with him or her in all our lives, whether they emanate, he or she emanates in the regular worlds, or as the enjoyment body when we become Arya Bodhisattvas. May we never be separated from this holy being, and when we become Buddhas, may we help him or her lead every single sentient being to the state of omniscience. And may we never ever see our Lama as inseparable from the Yidam. Thank you. I hope you all have an awesome rest of week, and we'll see you on Sunday and talk about karma. Thank you, thank you. I'm sorry. Oh, chat. Is there anything in the chat? Well, okay, we can talk after. Bye-bye. Thank you so much, everybody. Okay.